Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Paddle Pod, your weekly podcast covering professional paddle, presented by Hugo and Gons, onto episode 102. And as always, joined by my co-host Hugo here today. Hugo, it's great to have you on. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Gons. Bit of a big weekend with some of our mates, as you know, this past weekend. So yeah, definitely feeling it. But yeah, just happy to be back chatting about paddle. Obviously, a big tournament starting this week as we speak, or maybe in a few hours in Málaga. It's obviously the Premier Padel Málaga P1. But I think before that, actually, the main topic of the day is discussing I kind of have a feeling that it had been quite some time since we'd had some important or notable pair changes. So I'm actually quite excited to chat about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's definitely been a while, but I will say it seems like it's always the same actor. Let me just pinpoint it, because I think the last time we had significant pair changes, it involved the same person, or at least the same two in this case, obviously, because they are a pair. That one. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure everyone knows or has heard by now that it seems like Tello and Di Nenno are splitting, and they are pairing up with Augsburger and Cardona respectively. So obviously Tello will be pairing up with Pablo Cardona, and Di Nenno will be pairing up with Leo Augsburger. So yeah, I mean, as you were just mentioning, a bit of a shock, because we haven't had significant pair changes in what at least has feel like a while. And I think we definitely weren't expecting any kind of big pair changes, at least not before the summer break. So it definitely has come as a bit of a surprise. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to maybe start with you, Hugo. Please kind of take it anywhere you want. But yeah, what are your overall thoughts?
I think you make a really good point there about not expecting them before the summer break. And actually, as well, we haven't said it, but yeah, they're confirmed for next week's P1 in Tarragona, which is the last tournament before the long summer break, which is at least the length of August, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I mean, very, very surprising. As you said, it's, I think there's two actors that have been very common in this whole pair change situation for the past, I'd say maybe a couple of years. It started off being Juan Tello, moving away from Chingotto, playing with Paquito going to the forehand side of the court, then teaming up with Alex Ruiz, that not going well, then him going with Jofre, then going with, Dino Libac, doing actually really well, and then suddenly calling quits and teaming up with Di Nenno a few months ago. So I think it was firstly him, but then Di Nenno ending the Super Pibes partnership, playing with LeBron on the backhand. It's just been
I mean, ending with
chaos.
Paquito, ending it with Garrido.
Yeah, absolute chaos from both of them. So in a way, you could almost say that it's not surprising, but personally, based on the performances that we'd seen and the feeling that we were getting from, let's start with that pair, so the Tello Di Nenno pair, I am very surprised. I was looking at their kind of performances together. If I'm not mistaken, it's 6 tournaments, 3 semi-finals. I think that's actually really good results. They were, if I'm not mistaken, seeded like the 7th pair. Maybe they were the 6th pair at one point. I don't know whether Paquito and Berga have made up some points on them, but I'm pretty sure they were actually the 7th pair. So making the semi-finals half of those tournaments means exceeding expectations half the times you played. And if I'm not mistaken, they haven't had any stinkers. I mean, they've basically lost to Chingalan a number of times, and I can't remember all the other ones they've lost against, but I'm pretty sure they haven't had any massive stinkers. So yeah, I am really, really surprised. And again, due to the vibe that they had, they both seemed to be very comfortable on court. I mean, when they announced the partnership and throughout interviews that they've both taken part in since, they were saying that they feel very comfortable, that they were really good mates off the court, that obviously they played together at the Hexagon Cup and even with Argentina, and it just worked well. So yeah, all in all, very surprised due to the moment of the season, due to how they were doing performance-wise, and even based on who they're pairing up with. Because if I may just have a quick gander at the point situation, it is true that the Nenno was 7th seeded pair with Tello, and now with Augsburger, he will remain as the 7th seeded pair. So there's no changes from that perspective, which I guess is a positive. Actually, Augsburger now has about 300-400 more points than Tello. So, hey, but they remain in the same position. And obviously, Tello is losing out massively going with Cardona, because Cardona has got about just over half as many points as Di Nenno. Yeah, I just think that I would understand it if Di Nenno, say for example, we've spoken a lot of times about him going back with Stupa. I mean, he's called Stupa loads of times since they split. I think that would make sense. I think that's where we've seen his best version. But I think anyone beyond him, obviously not including Galan and Tapia, who seem very comfortable in their pairs and won't be changing, I'm just quite surprised about, because I would say that I agree that Augsburger has a higher ceiling than Tello, and he's probably playing better than Tello right now. Yes, maybe. I mean, he has beaten all the top-seeded pairs next to Cardona, at least in my eyes. But I don't think it's a sufficient difference to call it quits at this point in the season and based on the current results. I mean, Gons, do you maybe want to jump in?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree that it feels a little bit of a premature decision. I mean, you highlighted kind of the results that they've had. I mean, they've been outstanding. Like, if you're not happy with those results based on where you are currently and the seeding that you're at, then I mean, nothing's ever going to please you, right? I mean, I think you obviously want to push for more. I'm sure that every time Di Nenno gets bounced out of a semifinals, he's like, God, I really want to get to the final, want to win a tournament. But at the same time, you have to be realistic. And I think the results they've had are, outstanding. That you're talking about the first 5 tournaments of a pair. I don't know how many other pairs of, like, other than obviously Coello, Tapia, Chingalan. I mean, but these guys are, they live in another planet. But realistically, how many other pairs out of those have had like such a strong start as Tello and Di Nenno have? So it feels super premature. I mean, another one, for example, of the losses that you maybe could say like, oh, they were against a pair that they should have beaten was Leal and Guerrero, but that's also when Martín got injured. So obviously there's a bit of a nuance there. So I don't know. All in all, I'm just not really happy with this, and it does seem like this is coming from Martín. It seems like he's the one that kind of wanted to call it quits with Tello and has called Leo's Burger. As you said as well, from a points perspective, I mean, no real subtle change there. And I will kind of push back as well from a playing perspective. I personally think like Tello, at least right now, is playing better, or at least he's more in form, I would say, based on kind of the latest results in the tournaments. I do think that Leo probably gives you a bit of a higher upside. You have that chance of really beating absolutely anyone on any given day. Not that you can't with Tello, but you could see it more likely with someone like Augsburger. If he's having like the day, he obviously can with his smash, he can just create so many problems to the top pairs as we've seen this season. You do have a bit of a higher upside. I will say though, I wonder though, from like a base perspective, how will they perform? Because that's the thing with Lars Borget, as he's still a kind of fairly raw product. You feel like he gives you that upside, but a lot of the times his kind of floor, his base level can dip in and out. So I could just very, very well see them going to one final, but then the next tournament getting bounced out quite early. Whereas it seems like with Tello, he was reaching this like, stable level of getting to pretty much semifinals every time and being there, which I mean, I don't know. It feels like maybe I don't know, with Di Nenno lately, it just feels like he just thinks like the grass is greener and he's always trying to chase, and it just kind of feels like he's unaware of his situation. I don't know if he still thinks that he's at the level of Chingotto and Coello, which I mean, obviously as a player, you have to have that self-belief in yourself, but at the same time I kind of feel like you have to be realistic. And to me personally, right now, he's not one of those top right-sided players. I mean, I would even put players like, for example, I think Berga's having a better season than him right now. Obviously, the top 3, Coello, Chingotto, Lebron, I don't think he's nowhere near that level anymore, or at least right now. So I don't know. It just feels definitely premature. I also wonder if potentially, back in the day when Galan called him, is he just like regretting it? So basically, as soon as he has like an inch and a feeling of like, maybe this isn't exactly where I want to be, then he just jumps at whatever opportunity comes in front of him. So I don't know. It's a bit of a shame, because I also think that this kind of hurts Padel in a way, because like I said at the beginning, if you don't think these are good results, then honestly, anything, like, everything's just going to seem like a failure. And sometimes I think you have to take your time with a project and see the positives and see it develop to then reap the rewards in the long run. Because I definitely think that how they started and the level that they were showing. I mean, in some of these matches against Chingalan, I thought that they were super competitive. They had their moments. They had times where they could have grabbed a set and then potentially, drive on the match and potentially win. It wasn't like Chingalan were like stepping all over them. And they put Chingalan a lot of pressure. So I don't know. I just feel like with a bit more time, they could have definitely, gotten a step closer. So bit of a shame, to be honest.
No, I mean, I totally agree regarding their matchups with Chingalan. I mean, in the most recent one, they were so close to at least taking it to a third set, but just the match itself was so even, right? And the feeling seemed to be there, etc. I do, playing devil's advocate, see two sides to it. I mean, yes, they've done well. Yes, they haven't had any major stinkers apart from the match where he got injured, which I think is fair enough, against a pair who's also caused major upsets. I mean, obviously, Leo and Guerrero have been flying on outdoor court conditions, obviously in a big reason due to their game styles and Leal's smash. So I do see that. I think what this really reflects is how much players believe in Augsburger's potential to reach the number one spot. Because I think everyone now says, not very long ago, when players would ask who's got the best smash on tour, some players said Tapia, others said Galan, even some said Coello. Now every single player and coach says Augsburger. And I know it's not all down to the smash, but it is just such a powerful weapon and probably exactly what Di Nenno is missing, his biggest flaw, if you want to put it some way. So I think it really shows how much he believes in Augsburger. I would also say that Augsburger has beaten the top three pairs this season already, which no other player can say beyond Cardona. And I did feel like in a lot of those encounters, Augsburger was the guy leading that pair. I think he was the one causing havoc. I'm not saying that Cardona wasn't doing well, but I just think that Augsburger was maybe a little bit above Cardona from a playing perspective, at least in those wins against the top pairs. And also, when you say, I mean, it is true that I think there is a risk with Augsburger that every now and then he might have a bit of a slip up. Actually, when you analyse their performances this season, apart from that first round loss in Rome against Sacher and Campagnolo, I don't think they've actually lost to any pairs seeded below them. I think they've only ever lost to basically Coello and Tapia, Stupa Lebron, or Chingalan. And they've caused massive problems apart from when they actually beat them. So, I
I
mean,
think
does
they
that
only
show?
back maybe at the beginning of the season. They had a
Did
couple of
they? Yeah.
losses against them.
Did
But I'm
they?
not
Yeah,
sure if they were
maybe.
actually seated below them or not, to be honest. But yeah, I mean,
Maybe.
it's very similar
Maybe.
pairs.
Yeah, maybe they did. But yeah, I do think that he's shown consistency. And I think what Di Nenno's valuing is his performances in the big moments recently. I mean, beating the top pairs, winning that World Cup final, etc. And from a game style perspective, I know you don't particularly agree with this, but I do think that what would really work with Augsburger, and we'll see whether it does or not, but Di Nenno can probably just go back to basics and stop having to take unnecessary risks and just say, hey, I'm just going to get the ball in, produce about 2 to 3 unforced errors in a match and hope that Augsburger just cleans up with his attacking prowess. Now, it might not work, but I do think that obviously from an attacking perspective, he probably offers that little extra compared to Coello. I'm not saying he's a better, Tello. I'm not saying he's a better player. I think it's very even, and I don't really get his decision. I personally wouldn't have split, but I'm just maybe sharing what might have taken him that direction.
No, I mean, I think definitely there is the upside there with Leo. Like I said, maybe you don't have such a high upside with Deo, but I think Deo at this moment is potentially a bit more, I would say, consistent, or at least he was getting back to a level where his game all round was quite solid, and obviously he's still one of the best players offensively. He still has a great smash. And I will say as well, like I felt in a lot of the matches, for example, against Chingalan, I felt like a lot of it actually was more down to Di Nenno not playing as well, and potentially, especially I felt like defensively, so many times he was getting lobs like super short. Like I felt like Alan was able to manage him so well, and I felt like Deo was kind of bringing everything offensively. So I don't know. I mean, it's just a bit weird in the sense that yes, I get that. Obviously, Leo has this upside, and I agree with you. I mean, he has like the potential definitely to be number one day. Potentially still a bit young right now, So still a bit raw. And I don't know, hopefully Di Nenno is probably thinking like maybe I'm the one that can, steer this guy in the right direction and kind of give him a solid foundation for him to flourish. But we'll see. I mean, it's just like weird when you think about, you've only given yourself 5 tournaments, and I don't know, it just kind of speaks to, in a way, like the attitude, right? Like to me, it's more of a sign of your backs are a bit against the wall. Maybe you're not having the results that you want, even though objectively they are great results, but you're not willing to fight for it. I don't know. It's just kind of like the opposite of what Chingalan are showing. And I think that's kind of a strength to Chingalan. And I give a lot of respect to them for that, for constantly failing, quote unquote, because they're losing so much against Coello and Tapia, but they're deciding not to give up. They're deciding to try different things. And, eventually it worked and they managed to beat them again. And we'll see. Obviously, we still got the second half of the season remaining. So it's just a bit of a different contrast what I feel like has been happening with Di Nenno lately. Whereas as soon as things maybe get a little bit complicated, he just decides to, I'm going to switch, jump boats and switch pairs, which, it's a bit of a shame in my eyes. Look, I mean, obviously inside, we don't really know what's going on. I don't know if maybe there's like also some personal reasons behind. From what we can say from the outside, it definitely didn't seem like that, at least, from what you can see of how Tello and Di Nenno got along. But anyways, I mean, it's still an exciting partnership, obviously, to watch. And I am happy in a way for Augsburger as well. I mean, I think it's a bit of a shame that also Leo and Cardona kind of are splitting up because they've been showing huge potential. But they are still quite young. I mean, I have no doubts that at some point they will probably team up again when they're both, even better players. And it's exciting, I think, for Leo to get a player like Di Nenno who can probably give him a bit more of a solid foundation, more stability. And, I think this time then we can definitely see what he can do with a player, obviously, like Di Nenno.
No, I mean, I agree. I think maybe one last comment on that is it is true that Chingalan have shown a lot of patience and they have had a couple of losses here and there. Well, for example, against Cardona and Augsburger at the start of the season and very recently against Leo and stupa. But it is true that I guess if you're making the final week in, week out and just losing to the best pair in the world, maybe it's not that hard to say, hey, this is the best we can do. But Di Nenno, I think he just really believes in himself. I think he really sees how he can still be at the top and challenge the top pairs. And I think that's why he's decided to go this way. Not that I agree, but yeah, very exciting pair. I'm actually really looking forward to watching them because I don't know why, but I just have a feeling they're going to do well.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have all the tools to do well. And I think obviously this leaves us with the other pair, which is going to be Cardona and Tello. I mean, a very interesting partnership. Both of them are coached by Sebanerone. So I think that's obviously a positive. I mean, I think he's done a real good job with both of them, to be honest. I think separately, he's done a great job with Cardona and his development. And he's done a great job to bring kind of Tello back to where he used to be. And I must say, I quite like this partnership. I do think that Tello probably needs kind of like this really, like a Di Nenno type player. Obviously, we've seen, the best of him with someone like Di Nenno, also with someone like Chingotto, and with Di Nenno, obviously, recently he had been showing like a really good level. So obviously he is losing a bit of that, defensive guy that he can rely on to build the points for him. But at the same time, he's switching that with someone with Cardona who offensively can bring so much to the table. And, if we look at, for example, Tello's past like partnership with someone in a way similar, so like a lefty with obviously with Alex Ruiz. I mean, that season, even though they maybe didn't reach like the kind of level that we all had in terms of expectations, because back then both him and Alex Ruiz were kind of top players. They still were the fifth seeded pair by the end of the year. So I mean, they still showed like they were quite good, and they were actually, objectively also quite consistent. If I'm not mistaken, they reached a final in their partnership. So I think that Cardona is probably a better offensive player than, definitely, I would say, than Alex Ruiz. And to be honest, defensively, I don't see him kind of too far off. So we do have a bit of a precedent of Tello potentially working with someone with a lefty offensive player. Now we'll see in terms of their game styles and the speeds, because I do think that Tello probably doesn't have yet or his age, kind of the speed that Cardona has in terms of just wanting to bomb forward at every second. So that's going to be interesting. But offensively, I mean, I think they'll be also like a really interesting pair to watch.
No, I think they are going to be one of the kind of challenger pairs to fight for that fourth seeded spot, I'd say, because I don't see them challenging the top three. I mean, I don't see
No,
them
no.
really challenging Stupa and Leveron, who obviously mark that top three. I think my main concern with them is mentally. We've seen Cardona maybe not capitulate, maybe that's a bit of a strong word, but struggle in the key moments of matches, even recently against Chingalan, for example, when we've seen so many of those matchups. I felt like Cardona has been the one who's struggled from a defensive point of view, but also just making the right decisions. And Augsburger a lot of the times pulling weird faces, being like, "What are you doing?" Not that it's always been Cardona's fault. I mean, I think Augsburger is a punchy personality, and I think sometimes he's in the wrong. But I do think that Augsburger, in my eyes, has a bit of a he's shown a higher level during the key moments of the most important matches. I still have that concern with Cardona, even when he was playing with Paquito, that happened a lot. So I think he might struggle. And then from Tello's side, I also just have the feeling that sometimes when it's the key moments of key matches, he struggles. I mean, obviously over the last few years, he's had all sorts of up and downs, more downs really. And this season, which has been really his breakback season, obviously starting off really well with Livac and doing well with Di Nenno. It's not that I don't believe believe in him, but I just think that Di Nenno gave him that calmness, that very low unforced error count and percentage across their matches. And I'm slightly worried about him having a player next to him that he basically has to nurture, because Cardona is obviously still quite young, so Tello really has to lead that pair. And I don't know. I have my concerns. I'm not too sure. I mean, I think from a playing style perspective, they can work. They're both very fit. They volley very well. They both have a smash, so they can be seriously dangerous. But I just worry whether sometimes their mental side, which is probably both of theirs, I think it's probably the weakest attribute across both players, whether that's going to hinder their performances.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that Cardona and Augsburger have kind of split and I guess gone to, Tello and Di Nenno respectively, because we both talked about the fact that we thought obviously they were, prime candidates for any other players really, because they've got like such a unique skill set, both of them. So they obviously are quite attractive players. And we both thought like, potentially if they get a call here and there, they would definitely, they would be up for changing. But I guess it's just come as a bit of a surprise that they've changed, for Tello and Di Nenno. I mean, they're obviously great players, but we thought that probably the bar was a bit higher in terms of who they were going to go with. I mean, at least, when we talked about, we obviously, both of us thought that Yangwas and Goki, for example, were like a partnership that seemed also, that they were kind of going, they haven't had the best form as of recently. And both those players, it made so much sense from every single angle. Point wise, it made sense for Leo and Cardona. Playing styles, it made sense for Leo and Cardona. So it's just I guess it just shows you, right? Like, even if you just get like marginal gains, or maybe shows as well that potentially the partnership between Cardona and Leo was not just the form itself, but given that we've heard here and there that Leo is obviously a kind of a hard character to deal with on court, maybe there were already a bit of friction between the partnership, and kind of maybe they thought it was better to kind of part ways and before it got any worse. So just interesting, because I think that when I first heard the news, Leo and Cardona splitting wasn't like a huge surprise. I guess it was a surprise who they were going with, given that there's other players out there that I thought were better positioned to be with Cardona and with Leo Augsburger.
No, for sure. I was actually expecting exactly the other pair that you just mentioned, Yangwas and Goki, suddenly announcing that they were parting ways. And then that would kind of make a lot of sense. I mean, we've spoken about this a lot. I think Goki and Yangwas are almost doomed to be together. Not that I don't believe in the pair, not that they haven't had a good start to the season.
I guess they'll finish now, right?
Well, you'd think so. I mean, basically, their point situation is just too juicy to look elsewhere, really. And it just seems I mean, Yangwas, who traditionally is, I mean, we know he's a very emotional player and perhaps has struggled with his relationships with previous partners. We've seen him being so positive after their losses, and really encouraging their partnership and saying, Gogi, we'll be back, etc. So I think he really believes in that partnership. But yeah, as I say, I think the point situation is always super important. And yeah, that's probably the reason why they don't consider changing. And then when you look at the other pairs at the top, who obviously the other pairs above them are Paquito and Berga and John and Momo, they're probably at their peak of their moments as pairs, to be honest. So I guess it really makes sense for either of them to consider other options. Yeah, it's probably the best of the rest.
No, exactly. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. We do get to see them quite in, in just probably a week, given that they will be starting the Tarragona P1. So it's going to be super interesting to see how they fare out. Obviously, they then have a summer break to work on things together before the second half of the season gets underway. But yeah, I mean, I guess the paddle world just never ceases to surprise, and I'm sure that we've got some other pair changes coming along, once we hit the summer break. But yeah, I do hope that everyone's enjoyed this kind of quick and short episode that we had to get out. And please do leave us your comments and your thoughts around these new partnerships as well. And yeah, Hugh, it's been a pleasure as always.
Cheers, Gons, and thanks, guys. Catch you very soon.